So this is a class based on a book written by Hart. It's called Trouble I've Seen. If you haven't read it, and I'm assuming that most of you haven't because I handed most of you a book this morning, the assignment for today is chapter 1 and 2. So has anybody read that at all? Okay. For those of you who've read it, you can help me teach.
I haven't.
Okay. So let me just say for benefit of the recording that the book that we're talking about is Trouble I've Seen, written by Hart, and you see a picture on the back of him. He's a young black minister. And sometimes you wonder how people discover the Peace Church. He did. He found the Anabaptist Church and loves the tradition. Let me just read to you a little bit about him. He's an author, activist, and professor in theology in the Bible and religion department of Messiah University. So that's his paid position at this point, with 10 years of pastoral experience. He majored in biblical studies at Messiah College as an undergrad. He attained his MDiv, or his Master's of Divinity, with an urban concentration from Biblical Theological Seminary, and he received his PhD in Theology and Ethics from Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Here's what's so interesting. His dissertation considered how Christian discipleship, as framed by black theologies and contemporary Anabaptism, gesture the Western Church towards untangling the forces of white supremacy and the inertia of Western Christendom, which have plagued its witness in society for too long. So he thinks that black theology and Anabaptism are first cousins. As two traditions that emerged from the underside of violent and oppressive Western Christian societies, he found black theologies and Anabaptism each repeatedly turning to the particularity of Jesus in the gospel narratives, ultimately calling for an ethic of liberation in the black church and an ethic of peacemaking in the Anabaptist tradition. So some of you may have heard Hart speak at the NOAC session in 2018, I think it was. 2018, did you hear him speak there? Okay, good. Good speaker, and he's turning into being quite a leader in the nation, but also in the Anabaptist tradition. Can you hear me, Leon?
I'm having trouble understanding you with your mask on.
I'll take my mask off if I have your permission. Okay. So he has recently been the recipient of BCM Peace's 2017 Peacemaker Award. I'm not sure what BCM is for his local and national work. If you look at his blog called Taking Jesus Seriously, you can also go to the Christian Century, which is a magazine. Go to their site and you'll find his thoughts there. So let's begin. Do you know, oh, wait a minute, I've got the wrong page here. The first chapter is called When You Fit the Description. What do you imagine that means? This is going to be an interactive class, so.
It means we're racist.
Pardon me?
It means we're racist.
That's right. When do we hear that? We've heard this on TV and the media now for a couple of years. When you fit the description.
We're white.
What do police say when they pull over a black person? There was a robbery down a couple of blocks there, and you fit the description. And oftentimes, upon further look, they don't fit the description in any other way except that they are black. And they're probably male. So when you fit the description, and that's what Drew Hart discovered as he was growing up. He talks about his life in the first and second chapter. And it's very interesting, fairly normal, I would say. He was raised in Philadelphia, and he went to an elementary school, and at the time there was a very active busing program. And so he was actually bused to a school quite a ways away from his home, even though just a couple of blocks away there was an elementary school. But they had a good integration system there. And so he was bused quite a ways from home and had a mixed population. And he was just kind of a normal, average student. There is a book there if you would like it on that. Welcome to you. Then he went to high school.
No.
And by golly, he got to go to high school where he was really just about the only black there. And they thought he was cool. I tried to get a date of birth for Drew Hart, and I couldn't find it anywhere. But I'm guessing he's about 40, maybe 45. So this was at a time in some parts of the nation when black was cool. And he was cool, and he made a lot of friends. He started to notice, though, that some people made comments about black people. And it just kind of, he was fine, he had lots of friends and so on. Then he was hearing God's call, and he went to college at
Messiah.
Messiah, yeah, he was at Messiah, that's right. He went to college in Messiah, and that's when as he was entering, he thought, oh, this will be cool, this will be fine. In elementary school, I was just another body. In high school, I was cool, and now I'm going to a Christian institution, and it'll be great. And of course, it wasn't great, because this was the first time that he realized how white Christians really feel about black people. So let me just say, how many of you read the book back in the 60s, 70s, when it was very popular, a book called Black Like Me? Ah, that's wonderful. What happened in that book?
What happened in that book?
Yeah, very, very succinctly.
Well, the author went through certain medical procedures that made his skin black enough that he could pass as black. And then he traveled all over the country as a black person.
As a black person.
And experienced what life was like.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is portraying his experiences.
Right. And it was a time when we could read that book and think, oh, people do treat you differently if you are black. And he was attesting to that. So Drew Hart says, blackness is a visible marker that justifies suspicion, brutality, and confinement by white society, which we know this is true, even though many people in the United States deny that. So now, he wants us to know that in the church, we have got to face our racism. Are we racist? Please answer. Are we racist?
Sure.
In what way are we racist?
How many blacks do you see sitting here this morning?
There you go. We are segregated.
What characteristics do you look at when you look at a black person to identify them as different from a different black person?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part.
What characteristics do you look at in a black person to identify them as different from a different black person.
Yes, and Drew Hart is going to talk a lot about that. And so if those of you who attended this study, How to Be an Anti-Racist, that's how we started to understand that we have expectations of black bodies that we don't expect of white bodies.
I think
So,
the other thing that is at play is what I would call geographic segregation. In Quinter, we had Colleen, who was from Korea, and Jasmine, whose mother was white, but the father was black.
He's talking about Quinter.
And that's about it.
yeah, that's about it.
And if you go to Dillon's, if you go to Walmart, 99.9% of the people are white.
Yeah,
And so the interaction on a daily basis, when we were in Albuquerque or Louisville, I mean, it was just a rainbow of people, all sorts of different colors, all sorts of different dresses. And it was completely different from an interaction point of view. And so the lack of diversity in your home setting adversely affects your outlook on things because you're bound by a stereotype instead of the reality.
right, yeah. And that fits well into the introduction of this book, and you should read that also.
Ann,
Yes,
I'd suggest if you want to see their experience, a lot of black people go to a McPherson football game. Last night, I bet 40% of the crowd was black,
really,
between the crowd and the players.
okay,
Am I wrong?
Parents, yeah.
There was a high percentage of black people.
okay,
And I just, as I looked around, it seemed like everybody's getting along fine, but, more times you have that kind of experience, I think the better off we are to be less racist.
good point. And really, that's ultimately kind of where we're going, I think.
Hope so.
One of the things to follow up on that was, and I had noticed that in the homecoming games that I've seen over the years, that black parents drive from Texas to watch their kid play football in person. Black parents from Missouri, Oklahoma. And I'm thinking, wow, what dedication. And it's just NAIA division, the lowest you can get. And here are these parents cheering their kid on and yelling at the ref, just acting like a normal parent, pleased that their kid is playing college ball.
Right.
And that's really, what?
Normal.
Stereotypical, anti-stereotypical. I mean, it's just like, hey, they're just enjoying the moment,
Yeah. I can tell you a racist moment that I had, and I have to admit, I'm just very, very embarrassed by the emotion that I had. And as I look back on it, it was the most racist thing I've done in a long time. We were out eating in Kansas City. It was a Sunday, I think, and a family occasion. And as we were being seated, I noticed a large table of a black family. And they had 3 generations there, and they were dressed nicely, acting like white people. I'm absolutely amazed as I look at them, at their normalcy. The little children are talking to the grandparents. And I said to Phil, look at that family. Just look at them. They're just like middle-class people. Was that the most racist thing? I mean, the expectation that I have of black bodies has been learned through things that have been fed to me, and I haven't experienced the real black body. So, now I'm just embarrassed, and I hesitate to even tell you, but I'll bet you all do the same thing. Yes, Dave?
Interesting sidelight to this is my parents lived in Can-Do, North Dakota.
Can do?
Can-Do, North
I
Dakota.
love that, can do.
And they lived between two Indian reservations.
Okay,
We couldn't detect black prejudice there, but the
Yeah.
Indians were really, the
Oh,
Native
yeah.
Americans were really put down.
yeah,
There's no blacks in North Dakota.
yeah,
Come down here to Kansas, where does our prejudice go?
yeah.
It goes towards black people because we don't have any Native Americans here much. So up there.
Yeah.
It
Well-
all depends on where you live. and
That's
what-
right, right. And we'll talk about that very phenomena a little bit later. I want to talk about the cup of tea. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, when we were in Nigeria, and I was preparing my oldest son that we were going to have a baby brother or sister,
Uh-huh.
and his question was, is it going to be black or white?
I love that.
I knew.
And aren't you glad that it was white?
I bet your husband was glad of that.
Let's talk about the cup of tea story. When I first read that cup of tea story in the book, it was just a story. I have thought more about that one story in this book over the weeks that I've been reading this book, because it is so demonstrative of where we are. For those of you who haven't read the book, there was a reach out from a white minister to Drew Hart to get to know you better. Black. I want to get to know a black person better. And that was clear from the start. So they're at a McDonald's, I think, a fast food restaurant, and they're having a glass of sweet, sweet tea. And at one point, the white minister kind of interrupts himself and says, well, it's like this cup. I can see my side of the cup and you can see your side of the cup. And if I can't see your side of the cup, then I don't know what's on there. And I would like very much for you to teach me about your side of the cup. And I'll teach you about my side of the cup. And Drew's response on the inside was, that's silly. And he went on to say to this white minister, I already know what's on your side of the cup. What makes you think I don't know what's on your side of the cup? How do black people survive? We know what the white side of the cup looks like. You just don't know what our side of the cup looks like. That's racism. And so that was a very meaningful story to me, to get that perspective of course we know all about you. So he says here, and now we'll get to what you were talking about, Dave. Racism isn't first and foremost about a horizontal divide. It is vertically structured. What does that mean? Well, horizontal is like this, vertical is like this. How is racism vertical?
Well, it's fundamentally based on what I would call the purity system. And if you live in India from the north, you have lighter skin than Indians from the south. And the darker your skin, the lower you are on the caste system. And we have in the U.S. a caste system which puts whether it's occupational from an economic point of view, or whether it's skin color, skin tone, from a race and ethnic point of view, but the whiter you are, the higher you are. And it isn't left to right, it's up and down.
Right. So if in your society, you have white people and then people who aren't white, who's at the top?
What,
Always. White is always at the top. Yes.
Not everywhere.
Well, in America, we're talking about America.
He also makes a point that black people have to learn white literature, white music, white artists, white professors, white everything, but we don't learn their side. We don't learn about their white, or their black
Right.
writers and poets and artists and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We get a little bit,
Yeah.
but
A
not the
token.
way they, for them to survive, they have to learn white,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And it hasn't always been a pleasant learning, has it, for them? Yeah.
If you want to read another book that talks about this, read Caste.
What's
Caste.
Oh, caste. C-A-S-T-E.
Yep.
Okay.
And this author compares the caste system in India to our racism here,
Right.
plus what Hitler did in Germany.
Right.
And her argument is not about race,
Right.
it's about economic and whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
These three societies have developed those castes based on that. Very interesting book.
Yeah.
It's filled with a lot of true experiences that people have. And one of the ones that Lois and I shared, in Omaha in 1919, there was a lynching of a black man. Will Brown was his name.
Okay.
And in 2019, the community recognized that event as being a terrible thing. And Lois and I went to a worship service recognizing that.
Okay.
And she talks about his lynching in that book. It was much more descriptive than what we shared in Omaha a year ago. So
Huh.
she got it right, basically, and it just added some more details. But my point is, she talks in the book about the caste system, but she shares it with a lot of personal stories that really make it real. It's a great book. I'm about halfway through it right now. It's the kind of book you can read chapter 2 and put it down.
Yeah.
And then
And
come
come
back
back
to
to it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think Wilkerson, it's a black lady, Isabel
Wilkerson.
Wilkerson.
Oh, I've
Well,
seen
on
that
book too,
name.
but it wants to
Yeah. I've seen that name.
When I'm done.
So you might put that in the back of your mind, the caste system. One of the things that I think we're going to realize as we keep going in our anti-racism class and in this class and maybe in subsequent classes is that we need to do two things. One, we need to study about other cultures. In the climate of today's America, we're going to study about the black culture. What a lot of people don't understand is that when we say Black Lives Matter, right now it is Black Lives, but the movement is really, they say back to us, all lives matter, but they don't. So in North Dakota, the Indian lives didn't matter, the American Indian, the native peoples. And Colleen, oh, I'm sorry, we're not to name names, I'm sorry, but there is a person from Quinner who lives here now, and she didn't matter either in some cases. My own son, who is Mexican, adopted Mexican, his life doesn't matter to some people. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is teaching us, Americans, that all lives really do matter. So we can transfer that on. So
And
I've talked,
I think it's important from a global perspective to recognize that Black Lives Matter is an American Black Lives.
yes,
Because my Sudanese friends who live in the States feel really put down by Black Americans.
oh, because they're darker.
Well, not only because they're darker, but because they're more African. They're not as American.
Okay, okay. That is interesting, Roger, yeah. And so it fits that vertical hierarchy also. That seems so necessary to human beings, to always have somebody to look down on. And in the Anabaptist tradition, Next Sunday, we'll talk about chapter 3 and look at Jesus' life. This is absolutely so, to me, chapter 3 is the meat of the book. To Drew Hart, chapter 4 is the meat of the book. So pay good attention to those things. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Drew's childhood and growing up. One phrase that he uses is very important, and he says, the racial gaze. Racial gaze. Those of you who read the book, what did you think that meant? Because he'll use it repeatedly through the book. What does racial gaze mean?
Well, it's like Roger walking into church with his South Sudanese shirt on and, what's with that guy? You know, so you give him the once over. Oh, it's just Roger, okay. But, you know.
But you also think, oh, that's African. He's wearing an African shirt. What does Africa have to do with Roger? So in North Dakota, the racial gaze would have been, oh yeah, it's those Indians. It's the gaze means that we look at somebody, and if we racially look at them, then we have labeled them. That's the racial gaze. The other term that Drew Hart uses through this whole body, and I've seen it in other black literature also, or in other comments, is my black body. So this is, do we ever think of ourselves, our bodies, as being white? My white body? I don't. I don't ever think about, I mean, that's the way it is. I'm white. Everybody's white. But blacks know very quickly that when they are gazed upon, they are not equal, they are black. So the racial gaze, again, I think is probably a racist fault. A racist, we need to bring our awareness to how do we look at people. I'm a special educator, and so I've gone through quite a bit of training. One part of the feedback that you get from handicapped people, especially those people who are physically handicapped, in a wheelchair, using crutches, limping, whatever, they said that they wish that people would look at them because, and I've observed, I do it myself. If I see somebody who's in a wheelchair, of course I've looked at them, but it's different than when I see you in the grocery store or somebody else in the grocery store. I maintain eye contact, I look at you, but for some reason we don't look at people who are handicapped. And we also don't look at people who are different from us. We don't really look at them. And if you're on the receiving end of not being looked at, you know it. So the racial gaze is something that we need to really think about. So we've already talked about Drew's life. He also talks on page 44 about playing the race card. Have you heard somebody say that? They'll discount something that a black person, a Mexican, whatever, they discount and said, oh, he's playing a race card. You never heard that? Okay, playing the race card. For those of you who have heard about it, what in the world do you think that means when a white person says, oh, he's playing the race card?
It's dismissive.
Dismissive.
That's the same connotation as affirmative action.
Same connotation.
I get a break because I'm black, so I play the race card, so I can. Some people have used that for admission.
They could, yes, in a positive, like affirmative action, yeah, he's playing, I see where you're going with that, yeah.
Well, there's some people that don't like affirmative action.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got special status.
Absolutely
I mean,
right,
that's what playing the race card is.
right. But it can also be, oh, poor me. Oh, he's just saying that because he's black and he thinks he's been mistreated.
Well, it falls under the heading that what is being said or what is being done is of less importance or not to be believed, and the outcome, in my word, was dismissive. It just basically says this person is to be ignored. Their testimony doesn't matter. They're just trying to obtain something without working hard the way I got what I wanted
Yeah,
from my parents.
yeah. I think that is the meaning that Drew Hart talked about when he said playing the race card. So, just an aside here, one thing that I've become aware of when we talk about race relations is that the word believe, just believe them. Don't say, oh, you're playing the race card. We just have to believe them. This has happened through history. How many women have been raped and not been believed? Why can't we just believe people? Listen to what they say and believe them. Why do we need to doubt them? Can't we just believe them?
I think we have to then have to enter into a deeper level of understanding them and all, and I think that to say the race card and all of that, I can just, dismissive is a good word.
Yeah,
I could just go on, I don't have to enter into this any
Right.
further, I could just keep going the way I've been going.
right, right. How do blacks look at the race card? Those of you who've read the book, he talks about that. Blacks look at the race card as one card in the deck. It's just one card. We look at the race card as, oh yeah, this is how I define you.
I think it's also, from a broader perspective, an indication of what I would call the caste system or the purity system. And somebody somewhere in a class, a lady was saying, I went to borrow money from the credit union and they wouldn't lend me any money unless my husband came in and signed the note. So I went out to the car, signed my husband's name, and then went right back into the credit union here in town. And I don't know, I think it was 92, something relatively recent. It was like, well, that's kind of a residue of women are really just chattels to be owned by males. And you're not supposed to vote, you can't have a job outside the home, etc. I mean, historical analysis is full of putting people in boxes, and I'm in the top box.
Yeah, yeah.
Comment,
Yes,
we're talking about how white is good and black is not good. There's some exceptions to that. People pay big money to get good suntans. And also whites pay big money to make their hair curly. And black people pay big money to make their hair straight. And
I guess, Leon, what I'd say is that I don't think that's an exception, that all of that is racist.
pardon me?
I would say that all of that is racist.
Yeah.
And if you remember in this book, there are, white supremacists will call upon black notable people. Bill Cosby,
Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick, well, no. Not for this reason. They will call upon those black people who are saying to their black brothers and sisters, oh, come on, just work a little harder. You know, life is good. They are, do you remember the definitions in the book about assimilation and segregationist? Do you remember those? Okay, let's talk about them a little bit. The assimilationist, let me see if I can find it's right at the very beginning of the book. Assimilationist is one who expresses the racist idea that a racial group is culturally or behaviorally inferior and is supporting cultural or behavioral enrichment programs to develop that racial group. So when a black person says to his black brothers and sisters, oh, come on, just get over it, they're being an assimilationist. Try harder. It's your fault that you aren't accepted. A segregationist is just saying to that other group, you're just not, you're inferior. You're just inferior. An assimilationist wants everybody to look the same, like a white person. If we look at Christianity, what over the years has Christianity, and we're talking about America, what has Christianity, white Christianity, done to people of color in the United States and in other places in colonialism?
Put them in the balcony.
Move them to the balcony.
In this Omaha incident, the people in charge of it announced that this lynching was going to happen. They asked the people to put on their Sunday best and go to church and worship, and then after worship, come out for their entertainment.
In their sunny best, yeah. What have we done? What has white Christendom done that is so racist to people of color?
I have memories of when I went into BBS in New Windsor, and that would have been April '66. Coming from Southern California, came to New Windsor, and here was this big building, and there was one door that said colored entrance and one door that said white entrance.
Wow. When, that would have been in what year?
66, April
Yeah.
66.
Yeah. The civil rights movement pretty much got rid of those real obvious things about racism.
Let me talk about sin.
Yeah.
That black stuff, you know, we use theological terms, I think, that are maybe bordering on that.
White Christians tend to be either segregationists or assimilationists. They are not anti-racist. Yes, Jen?
We even have a hymn that says, wash your soul as white as snow.
That's biblical.
Yeah.
So it can't be.
Biblical.
But then Roger was pointing out, how do you explain to our black brothers and sisters in South Sudan that something is whiter than snow, and I've never even
seen
seen
snow.
snow?
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
the
is it
interpretation, the translation took that into account to make that more culturally acceptable. And that's one of the things that I don't think that we focus on, and that is the cultural aspect of the Bible.
All right, don't get ahead of yourself here, please. Yeah. Yeah. That really is going to be about chapter 3, Jesus. Okay? When we talk about Jesus being a radical,
Sunday school.
honestly, that's what Drew Hart knows. Drew Hart knows that Jesus is a radical. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to answer the question that I've asked. Christian missionaries have gone to people, groups of people. Think of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Think about being missionaries in other parts of the world. Think back in the 40s, 50s, 20s, so on. Think about that time. Think about the history of white Christianity. This is not a current question. What have we done to people that we have been proselytizing to. Think physically, what have we done? We've cut their hair. We've dressed them in Western dress. We've taken their language from them. And why did we do this? Please answer me.
We thought it was better
Why?
because we're on top.
Because we want to make them more white. We want to make them more white. Think about America from the very, very beginning. That hierarchy, vertical hierarchy, whites were always on the top. And as immigrants came in, even other white immigrants, they were below. And slowly through history, we've taken into the white supremacy the people who are white, unless they're poor white trash. Yes.
Even black churches, I don't know if that's a racist statement or not, but black churches versus white churches services, there's a big difference, I guess. I haven't been to very many black services, but we don't get with it like they do, and we
Yeah.
make fun of it.
And we
how
make
long-
fun of it,
And
yeah.
how long their services last as opposed to ours. We have to get ours done in an hour or less. Because, lots of reasons, but theirs may go 2 hours or 3 or whatever, and
Right.
they're into it.
Right, right.
And we judge it.
And we judge that. Oh, they forgot that meatloaf is hot at Village Inn at 12. Yeah. So, white Christendom really has been either segregationist or assimilationist. And now black authors are teaching us, no, let's be anti-racist. So if you find yourself making an assimilationist, having a thought, making a statement, oh, if they were just better, if they would work harder, then you are not anti-racist. I think it's a steep climb. Let's talk about race. I've talked with people about race, and I just did a little bit of research about the concept of race. What do you think I discovered?
It's a relatively modern term.
Relatively, talking about basically in the 19th century, mostly. Yeah, before the 1800s, we didn't talk about race. Now, we might have labeled people, but we didn't call them a different race. They looked different.
The race is a construct. Have you seen the National Geographic magazine of about 5 years ago on racism?
Okay.
Where they have are they identical twins? Bill?
Can't be that.
Well, they can't, they're twins, one's black and one's white.
Oh, right.
And their parents are,
One black and one
you
white.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, that whole magazine is dedicated to racism.
Do you
And
still have that? Can you find it in your boxes?
come to my spare bedroom and find it. Yes, we do have it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so it's a relatively new term that we've used to describe people by race. So just for all of us to know, human beings are real, there's only one race. Through history, there's been a lot of examination of why do people look different from each other. And there have been attempts to put them, to define it in a way that still retains humanity. But gosh, that's hard, isn't it? Isn't that hard if we're separating people? to maintain humanity, one to each other. As a matter of fact, in the Middle Ages, especially European culture, there was a common belief that people came from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I have trouble saying that because it's a lot of it here. So, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth. Has anybody ever heard of that?
Yep.
Which is the black?
Ham.
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 Christian churches really grabbed onto that. So black people come from Ham. Shem is the Semitic and Asian, and Japheth is Indo-European. So we are whites, according to this thought, are from Japheth, and then Ham, of course.
And is not apartheid built on that concept?
Absolutely. Yes.
I think if the Dutch people structured their whole religious rationale for that
Right.
based on this
Right.
passage.
So as white Christians, we need to know about that because it's still thrown around. It's still thrown around. So you can look up the people of Ham, put it in your Google, look up and do your own research. It's very racist.
One of the things that we run up against, though, is your people who are really into this thing of seeing black people as descendants of Ham, is that in the scripture itself, Noah curses Ham and makes the point that he is to be the servant of his other two brothers. And the reason for this is, I guess after they'd been on the boat a long time and then they got off and they started raising grapes again and getting wine, Noah got carried away and drank too much and passed out in his tent. And his sons discovered that situation. And the disgrace wasn't him being passed out or being drunk. The thing that Ham did that was wrong is he went in to the tent and covered his father up so as to help him maintain his modesty. And then when Noah woke up and discovered that somebody had covered him up, he really got ticked off. And when he found out it was Ham, he cursed him. And he proclaimed to Ham and his brothers that he is to be the servant of his brothers.
So there you go. If you Googled it, that's what you would have found out.
And
Yes.
when you say we're all one race,
Mhm.
is that assimilationist?
No,
It isn't?
I don't think it is.
It isn't?
I think if we are all one race, we are all equal. How can that be assimilationist?
Isn't that what assimilation wants? Everybody to be one?
Only if you get better. Assimilationist always has that. I mean, we feel pretty good about being assimilationists. Oh yeah, we're all of one race. It does feel pretty good to be an assimilationist until you realize that you're wanting them to be more like you. You want them to cut their hair. You want them to use your language. It goes all the way back, generations and generations and centuries.
So we assume they're going to be white. We could say there's in the one race we could all be brown, right?
Yeah, on the basest part, BASE, ST, in the most base way, yes, we will all be the same color. But in God's eyes, we are all human beings. We are one race. So I remember being in college and thinking, oh, we're going to get this so mixed up, there's going to be so much intermarriage and so on, we will be one color. But that I was naive and innocent and young at the time. That isn't the point. That isn't what Jesus really wants. He doesn't want us all to be the same color. Jan?
Well, it seems to me we have to look to science here for DNA studies. If it turns out that everybody's got the same DNA, basically, fine. You know, I don't have a problem with that. And therefore, I could say we are all one race. But I don't know that to be the case, just because I haven't studied it. I don't know. I'm still cogitating about that.
Any comments about that? Does anybody know?
I'm gonna find the magazine. I'm gonna get her the magazine.
Okay, okay. Yes, oh, I'm sorry, go Dan.
From the scientific point, race is a meaningless term, that we don't use it. That's a social term. The other interesting thing that you might not be aware of is that the gene pool is wider in the black population, which basically means they are the ancestral population. The white population are mutants, and we're inbred. That we're the people that ended up in the northern climates, and our white skin enables us to convert sunlight to vitamin D so we can survive in the northern climates better than black people. And over the years, we evolved an ability to digest milk that other people don't have. So we could move into those northern climates and drink reindeer milk or cow's milk and live, where the average black person, if they would have to live on milk, they would be so gassy they would be miserable. But, so the take-home message is black people are on the whole healthier than white people, and if you want to have healthy grandchildren, encourage your grandchildren to marry a black person, not a white person, because that further inbreeds us white mutants.
Yeah. Jan, I think it has been scientifically proven. We are one race. And if you'd like to investigate that and report back to us next week, I would like that very much. But yes, we are all one race. And to Dan's comment, I think it's also been scientifically proven that the black population they are our ancestors. They were here first. So let's go on. We just need to leave that topic now of how human beings have separated themselves. And beginning in the 19th century, they started to label us by race and give that a lot of credence. Race now, I think we've established, and I hope you can go along with this, is, as Dan said, we don't talk about race. In this case, though, the thing that we're coming to understand is that while race is not real, racism is. That's what we need to talk about. So, Drew talks about the concept of critical race theory. Critical race theory talks about, well, it answers these questions. What is the meaning of race in society? So again, now I'm going to use that word race, understanding that we are only one race, but for us, racism matters. And so we categorize people by race. So we're going to continue to use that word. What is the meaning of race in society? How is society organized by race? What are the origins of racism? How does it operate in and affect our daily lives? So Drew kind of answers that question on page 51. If you haven't read it, please make sure that you get to this. In this view, racism is a racialized, systemic, and structural system that organizes our society. Racism structures society in such a way that the white dominant group members, that the white dominant group systematically or systemically advantages and overvalues its own white group while oppressing and exploiting other people. So that is critical race theory. That's how now, when we talk about racism, we need to know, we need to analyze those questions. How does race play a part in society? How do we organize people? How do we organize our society according to that? So we're about to the end of our time. I need to encourage you to read chapters 1 and 2. I will send out an email, our reading assignments. I'm not reading it to you. I'll be quoting some things, but I really would like you to be reading the book if you can. Next week we will talk only about chapter 3. And what is the name of that chapter? It's the Jesus chapter in the book. And it's just so integral to our approach to becoming anti-racist. So next week is channel 3. The week after that, the week of the 18th, is Don't Go With Your Gut. And Drew Hart says that is the gut of the book. Don't go with your gut. Then on the 25th, we'll be talking about Whiteness Matters and Black Lives Matter. We need to get those two things out there, okay? Then the 1st of November, we'll read chapters 7 and 8, the lure of status and respect. This is the very reason that we have racism. And then renouncing every hierarchy. We need to get to that place. And then finally, the last week, we'll talk about where do we go from here. On that Sunday, that last Sunday, I'm going to give you an assignment right now. This is a class, after all. And so I'm going to give you the assignment of remembering the history books that you had in school. I don't care what grade, doesn't matter. My memories are mostly high school history books, world history, American history, so on. Think of your American history and think about the paragraphs that you read about people who were inventors, politicians, how you read about culture. And you're going to realize very quickly that, as Phil said earlier, it was primarily white history. It's white literature, it's white music, it's so on and so on. It's white. So I want you now, in the next 6 weeks, to be thinking about one person or one event in Black history. Write a paragraph about it, because we want to rewrite the books. How would you rewrite the history books? So I became aware, this is an example, and we need to be done. I became aware of an incident that happened not very far from here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1919, something like that, the Tulsa riots. Raise your hand if you've heard of it, Tulsa riots. Oh, you're such a great group. If you haven't, you need to really look. It wasn't very far from here. Talk to Art Hoke about the KKK in McPherson. Take a black event, a black person. I bought a deck of cards from the Equal Justice Initiative, and it has It's a way to start getting to know black people. Find a black inventor, a black politician, somebody that's notable, that would end up in a history book, but they're not white. Do some research, write a paragraph, and we're going to share those on the last Sunday that we have class on the 8th of November. Okay? Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next week at 8:30. I'm thinking that we'll continue to be inside because it's just too cool in the mornings to sit outside.
Leave the chairs.
Leave the chairs, we'll clean them. And thank you, go home and be ready for church at 10:15 on channel 13.